Now, we step into the dim, coal-dusted world of a Victorian manor. Not as its pampered guest, but as its lowest-ranked inhabitant, the domestic servant. You would never think that one could accomplish so much before sunrise. And yet, here you are awake long before dawn, your bones already aching and your feet already cold. There's no snooze button, no soft duvet, no gentle stretch into the day. Just a clang of the service bell and the aggressive reminder that someone upstairs wants their fire lit. Immediately. The walls of your tiny attic room don't insulate against the cold. Your blanket might be mistaken for a damp towel. And your pillow could double as a sack of potatoes if it weren't already beneath someone else's head. Your roommate, yes. You have one. And maybe two grunts awake beside you. She doesn't speak. Neither do you. Talking requires warmth, and warmth is in short supply. So you fumble into your uniform, which you had no time to dry yesterday because you were busy hand-scrubbing the master's trousers. It's still damp. Congratulations. You now know the joy of Victorian layering combined with mildew. Your shoes worn down, stiff, and naturally unsuited for walking. Which is unfortunate, because that's all you'll do for the next 16 hours. Your first job is to light the fireplaces in the family's rooms. This means you must tiptoe like a Victorian ninja through half-lit corridors, carrying coal buckets that collectively weigh more than you do after skipping dinner 2 nights in a row. The good news, carrying coal is excellent for your core strength. The bad news, you don't have time to eat breakfast. So that strength is mostly theoretical. The upper floors of the manor are eerily quiet, like a museum of people you serve but rarely see. You move through them like a ghost, leaving warmth for people who will never thank you. Only complain when the fire smokes. 1 misplaced cinder and you're reprimanded. 2, and you're replaced. Historians still argue whether early morning fireplace duty was meant to build character or simply break spirits. And while you're on the topic of spirits, the hallway at this hour does feel mildly haunted, probably by former servants who also died in obscurity while polishing doorknobs. You finish with the fireplaces just in time to return to the kitchen, where the cook gives you a look that says, late again. And also, I despise you. Whether or not you are, in fact, late is irrelevant. Time bends in the manor's lower levels. You're allowed a sliver of porridge if you're lucky, and maybe a crust of bread from yesterday. And by bread, we mean something closer to sandstone with yeast. Still, you chew through it like a champion, because you know this may be your last solid bite until evening. Outside, dawn finally breaks. Birds sing, light pours into the windows upstairs, and you're scrubbing boots in the scullery. It's barely 6 a.m., and you've already walked 5 miles inside one house. You're not even halfway through your day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time down in the comments. I'm curious how many of you are also up way too early. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't stop, you don't pause. And if you think this is the part where you sit down with a teacup and admire the silverware, I have some bad news. You are the one who's been polishing that silverware since Tuesday. And it's now Friday. Somehow, it still isn't shiny enough. Your job list grows faster than your ability to say yes. Ma'am, boots to clean, floors to scrub on your knees, chamber pots to empty, yes. Those still exist. And no, there is no protective gear, no gloves. Unless you count courage and denial as tools, you carry them carefully, pretending the sloshing sound is just tea. Meanwhile, upstairs, the family continues the sacred ritual of living without noticing that the house operates like clockwork because dozens of invisible hands are moving it. That would be your hands, and your back, and your knees. Breakfast service is a performance art in which everything must look effortless, but cannot be effortless. The toast must be warm, but not soggy. The tea must arrive exactly as the lady of the house descends the stairs, never early, never late, like a punctual ghost. Historians still argue whether the strict timings of Victorian breakfast etiquette were about social control or just chronic boredom. After breakfast, it's time for cleaning. Real cleaning, not swipe it with a paper towel and call it a day cleaning. We're talking chimney soot, hand-waxed floors, and enough dusting to start your own ecosystem of respiratory illness. You dust things you didn't even know had surfaces behind the picture frames, under the wainscoting, inside the dumbwaiter. Oh, and don't forget laundry day. That's not once a week. It's whenever the laundry becomes inconvenient to someone upstairs, which means it's every day. The washing involves wooden tubs, lye soap that burns your skin, and enough wringing and twisting to qualify as medieval CrossFit. Drying happens in a damp basement, or, if it's sunny, on a line that someone upstairs inevitably complains blocks their view of the rose garden. By mid-morning, your arms are jelly, your apron is filthy, and your sense of time has collapsed into one long, unbroken hour of work. No one has said your name. You don't have a title beyond girl or you there. You start to understand why Victorian servants had such high turnover. Burnout existed before HR departments did. A fringe detail that rarely makes it into period dramas, some manors insisted that servants turn their faces to the wall when the family walked past, lest you soil their eyes with your face. Yes, that's a thing. It's hard to feel human when the walls get more eye contact than you do. The most exciting part of your morning avoiding the butler, he's in charge, and his power is absolute. He may be 3 inches shorter than you and deeply allergic to cats, but within these walls, he is God, and God does not appreciate uneven tablecloths. And so, your day stretches onward like a piece of overcooked cabbage, pale, limp, and with a smell you just can't ignore. But don't worry, it's only 11 a.m. Lunchtime is not. In fact, a time when you get lunch, that's adorable. No, lunchtime in a Victorian manor is a strictly choreographed opera in which you, the humble servant, play the silent set crew moving scenery behind the curtain. And if you make a sound louder than a whisper, congratulations, you're now a fired set crew. You begin by preparing the dining room. Every fork must be in its assigned seat, like it's auditioning for a royal banquet. There are 12 kinds of forks. None of them are for you. You haven't had breakfast. You probably won't have lunch. But rest assured, you'll be carrying 6 different soup tureens back and forth like you've won the privilege of upper arm muscle growth. As you lay out the food, remember this is not food for mere sustenance. This is status, sculpted in aspic. The meat pies are engineered with more care than your living quarters. And someone has, unfortunately, decided jellied eels are the height of sophistication today. Historians still argue whether Victorian cuisine was a celebration of empire or just a dare that got out of hand. Meanwhile, you hover like a shadow, waiting for the signal to clear the plates. You pour wine, you refill glasses, you do not speak, you do not breathe too loudly. You definitely do not look directly at the guest who just compared your presence to that of a well-trained house fern. And if you think you're escaping lunch without an incident, you haven't met the footman. He's got beef with you about yesterday's tea service, when the spoons were allegedly clinking too enthusiastically. You apologize. You didn't know spoons could be emotional triggers. By the time the family finishes their 6th course, not joking, you gather the dishes like a game show contestant with seconds on the clock. Everything gets washed in a giant scalding basin in the scullery. There is no dishwasher. There is you, your aching fingers, and a bar of soap that's more lye than lather. Then comes servant lunch. Finally, you think, a break. But here's the twist: you eat standing. In a corner, in the same kitchen where you just washed mutton grease off 1,200 plates. Today's delicacy, yesterday's rejected jelly loaf, and whatever the cook scraped off the prep table. You eat it anyway, because hunger has obliterated pride. The cook, a legend in her own apron, barks at you to chop carrots. You do, with a knife so dull it's basically a spoon with ambitions. You're not allowed to use the good knives. Those are for visible people, and just when you think you might get to go to the bathroom. Guess what? The lady of the house is taking a stroll through the garden and needs her parasol retrieved. This is code for run upstairs, locate the correct parasol among the 7 nearly identical ones, and deliver it to her with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. Oh, and speaking of bathrooms, no, you don't get one. You share a chamber pot behind a curtain in the cellar. It smells like every bad decision ever made in a confined space. A quirky fact: some manors forced maids to use outdoor privies even during storms to build character. That's one way to summon pneumonia. So, as the bells chime 2 o'clock, you have to wonder, was being born a servant simply nature's way of preparing you for reincarnation as a sponge? Afternoon is the time when things calm down, unless, of course, you're a Victorian servant, in which case the calm is an illusion, like decorative pillows or moral purity in the aristocracy. You return from delivering the parasol just in time to find that the children have returned from their walk. This is not good news. You are now expected to help the governess wrangle them into something that resembles civility. There are 3 of them, each more sugar-fueled and rule-immune than the last. They have names like Percival and Millicent and Hugo, and they use them like weapons. Percival says you smell like boiled socks. Percival is right, you do, because you do not get time to bathe. Victorian children are somehow both miniature adults and wild animals. Their playroom is your battleground, and today you are the poor soul scrubbing ink off the wallpaper while dodging flying wooden alphabet blocks. Historians still argue whether Victorian child-rearing was about education or simply advanced psychological warfare. You attempt to distract Hugo with a wooden horse. He responds by biting you. You accept your fate. By now it's 3:30 p.m. and you're summoned to tea service. The word tea is deceptively gentle. Tea is not a meal. Tea is a 3-tiered obstacle course involving hot liquid, crumbling pastries, and social landmines. You carry in the tray porcelain so thin it quivers if you breathe near it, and you serve. In silence, one shaky saucer at a time. The lady of the house comments that her biscuit is stale. This is not your fault. It is now your fault. The butler eyes you like a disappointed hawk. You've forgotten to fold the napkins into their traditional waterfowl shapes. Again, you resolve to spend your non-existent free time learning origami via osmosis. Once tea is done, it's time for more cleaning, silver polishing, boot blacking, and making sure the brass knobs shine like they were forged in heaven. You polish so long, you begin to hallucinate friendly ghosts in the reflections. You consider asking one to swap places. Even ectoplasm probably gets meal breaks. Fun fact, the average Victorian servant walked more steps in a day than most modern athletes. Quirky detail, some manors required female staff to turn to face the wall when a family member passed them in the hallway. Not out of shame, just for the aesthetic. Your job, after all, is to be seen, not being seen. Then there's the laundry. Let's talk about laundry, not the kind where you toss clothes into a humming machine and sip wine while you wait. No, this is laundry powered by blood, sweat, and wood fires. You haul water from a pump. You heat it over open flames. You stir the clothing with a paddle the size of a canoe oar. Soap is caustic. Water is scarce. And the linen endless. You scrub until your knuckles look like they've fought in a bare-knuckle boxing match. You take satisfaction in one thing: you've accidentally turned Lady Millicent's lace petticoat slightly pink. You will be blamed. But secretly, it's your Mona Lisa. By now, your spine is a question mark, your hands are raw, and your only reward is that dinner prep is next. Because of course, this day isn't close to over, not even remotely. Dinner is not food. Dinner is theatre. And you, unfortunately, are part of the backstage crew whose job is to make it all look effortless, even though nothing about it is. While the upstairs family dines in candlelight on soup consomme and roasted fowl with names longer than your weekly pay stub. You are in the kitchen, dodging hot pans and the personal moods of cook, who may or may not be channeling the wrath of several Roman gods today. You stir, you chop, you carry trays upstairs so steep and narrow they qualify as punishment in at least 4 major religions. The servant's staircase is just wide enough for your dignity to not quite fit through, which is fine because that got left behind around breakfast. A bell rings. That's the summoning bell. It's not so much a request as a polite alarm. We need more sauce, and we need it now. There are 8 bells in total, each a different tone, each corresponding to a different room. You know them by heart. The parlour's is a chirpy ding. The dining room, a low condescending chime. The nursery bell rings like it wants attention, but doesn't know why. Historians still argue whether these bell systems improved household efficiency or just institutionalized microaggression. Either way, you respond faster than Pavlov's dog and with far less reward. You climb, you serve, you leave silently, with the grace of someone who knows that creaking floorboards can get you fired. Back downstairs, you eat dinner if you can call it that. Dinner for you is cold bread, a dollop of cheese. And if you're lucky, a boiled potato that's only mostly grey, occasionally. There's meat, the kind of meat that raises more questions than it answers. But it's calories. And calories are what fuel the remainder of this endless evening. You eat standing up, because chairs are for people who don't have 14 things to do in the next 12 minutes. Your stomach processes sadness more efficiently than protein by now. You fantasize briefly about toast. Not having toast, just the idea of toast. Once the family has retired to the drawing room, it's time to tidy the dining room. This includes removing 16 forks that all look the same but have wildly different names and purposes. There's the oyster fork, the dessert fork, the dinner fork, the salad fork, the what is even the point fork. Each must be cleaned, polished, and returned to its precise drawer. You mop the floor in silence, accompanied only by the ticking of a wall clock that judges you with every second. Somewhere upstairs, someone coughs delicately. Someone else requests a fresh cushion. The dog gets better food than you. By now, it's nearly 10 p.m. And you're just about done with dinner duties. Which brings you to the next great event of the day, preparing bedrooms for the night. This means hot water for the wash basins, a warming pan slid between the sheets, and if you're in the mood, removing any dead mice that expired in the mattress overnight. You light fires in the hearths, replace chamber pots, fluff pillows, and retreat before anyone notices you exist. A quirky tidbit. Some maids were expected to memorize the sleeping preferences of each family member, including how many times the pillow should be fluffed. One wrong fluff, and suddenly you're being scolded for negligence. You dream of one day fluffing your own pillow, and not as a verb in a job description. At last, the house begins to dim. But don't mistake this for peace. Somewhere, a bell will ring. Someone will wake up needing a second blanket, or third thoughts. You remain half alert, because a servant never truly sleeps. You simply rest, in shifts, between duties, and pray the dog doesn't need a walk. The house may sleep, but your work is far from over. While candle flames flicker into dying stubs and the final clinks of upstairs teacups fade into polite oblivion, you are in the scullery, wrist deep in greasy water that has long since given up trying to be clean. The plates are stacked like architectural nightmares, and no one, not even you, remembers who ate what or how. You scrub regardless. It's not about understanding, it's about surviving the porcelain apocalypse. The scullery is damp, poorly lit, and smells like a soup made from despair and dishwater. You don't have gloves. Your hands are raw, fingers pruned into permanent raisins. Soap is a luxury. So is warm water. You use lye and sand. It's exfoliation, Victorian-style industrial, involuntary, and just a little bit corrosive. Oh, and here's a quirky tidbit. Some houses employed a specific person just to polish the silverware. All day. Every day. With ashes, and a soft cloth made from the remains of someone else's better life. Historians still argue whether that role was created for efficiency or simply because the family liked the smell of suffering mixed with tarnish remover. The scullery is where dignity goes to die. You once dropped a plate. Once. And cook didn't yell, she just looked at you. A single, slow blink. It was worse than yelling. You've never dropped anything since, except hope. You drop that daily. By 11:30 p.m., the house is finally quiet. Not peaceful, just quieter. You tiptoe through the servants' quarters, checking locks, snuffing stray candles, ensuring the family cat is not, in fact, locked in the dumbwaiter again. It's happened twice. The cat has opinions about it. You stumble into your shared room. It's about the size of a pantry and smells like old wool and even older ambition. You sleep in a narrow bed beside someone who snores in iambic pentameter and dreams of jam. You can't open a window without letting in the cold, and can't close it without inviting mildew. You undress quietly. because someone is always on the verge of sleep. Your uniform hangs on a single bent hook. You own exactly one nightgown, and it's seen better decades. You slide into bed and pull the blanket up to your chin. It's more thread than textile, but it's familiar. And just as you begin to drift warm, exhausted, and finally, blessedly horizontal, the bell rings. Someone upstairs forgot to blow out a candle, or they want water, or a different pillow, or they've remembered something incredibly urgent, like needing the window opened precisely 1 inch. The reason doesn't matter. The bell rings and you rise. There is no such thing as a full night's sleep. Not for you, if you're lucky. You get 5 hours, divided by interruptions. Sleep becomes a game of fractions. You develop a sixth sense for the bell's tone, learning to spring from bed with the grace of a reluctant catapult. You pad upstairs in the dark, no lights, no creaks. You could do this blindfolded, and sometimes you practically are. Your eyes barely open. You fulfill the request, murmur a polite "yes, ma'am," and retreat. Back down, back to bed, back to sleep. Briefly, historians still debate whether the Victorian ideal of upstairs-downstairs harmony was ever real or simply romanticized servitude wrapped in linen and candlelight. From your side of the staircase, it feels more like musical chairs, except the music is a bell and the chairs are unpaid overtime. And so, you sleep again if the mattress allows. It's stuffed with horsehair, or maybe bricks. You're not sure. You just close your eyes, counting exactly how many hours remain before the kitchen gong declares another beginning. It begins before dawn. Not metaphorically, literally. The sky hasn't even thought about turning blue yet, and already you're upright, fumbling with laces and pins. Dressing in the dark so as not to wake your roommates. They need their 3 hours of sleep. 2. You shuffle downstairs by candlelight, one hand on the banister, the other clutching your sanity like a loose button. The kitchen is cold, colder than outside. Somehow, the hearth died hours ago, and you must coax it back to life with flint, kindling, and quiet cursing. The silence is thick, like unspoken resentment. You break it with kindling cracks and the sigh of old wood accepting flame. You knead bread, by hand, with flour that's questionably fresh and water that might still be left over from yesterday. You don't ask. Asking implies options. Your hands move on instinct, churning dough that clings to your fingernails like a needy child. The kitchen maid joins you eventually, eyes glazed, face already dusty with flour. Together, you begin the day's choreography measured, exact, and utterly uncredited. Breakfast for the staff is porridge. Technically, it's more like sadness served hot. No sugar, no butter, just oats boiled in water and the vague memory of cows. You eat quickly, because the real breakfast, their breakfast, is next. Eggs, toast, jam, sausages, kidneys, smoked fish, grilled tomatoes, buttered scones, and tea. So much tea. You prepare it all, you do not taste it. That's not your job. Your job is to cook, serve, smile, and vanish like mist. Historians still argue whether this degree of separation between preparing food and ever eating it was social etiquette or deliberate cruelty with a lace collar. By 8 a.m., you're serving in silence. Footmen glide with practiced elegance. You avoid eye contact, your hands perfectly steady as you pour milk into porcelain cups that cost more than a year of your wages. You've never once chipped one. You live in terror of the first time. After breakfast, you clear plates with surgical precision, scrape leftovers into the slop bucket for pigs you'll never meet, and begin the washing up again. You wonder if dishes multiply in the night like Victorian rabbits. The sink agrees. Then you begin lunch prep. It's not even mid-morning. But lunch waits for no servant. The house is a clock, and you are one of its less glamorous gears. Chop, stir, boil, wipe, repeat. The housekeeper floats in. She says nothing about your work, only points out a mist smudge on the brass. You thank her. That's the script, always. Yes, ma'am, even when you mean I hope your tea tastes like regret. A quirky custom in some households. The staff were expected to turn away when a family member passed by, as if their eyes might offend the air. The day stretches on. Tea service at 4, dinner at 7, supper at 10. 3 full meals and 2 miniature ones, each requiring orchestration, perfection, and enough cutlery to equip a small militia. By now, your back is a question mark, and your feet have filed a formal complaint. But dinner is sacred. Multiple courses, candlelight, music. You wear your cleanest apron, your best poker face. You serve dishes with French names you can't pronounce and ingredients you've only ever seen in raw form. Historians still debate whether Victorian cuisine was genuinely refined or just heavily disguised poverty with extra parsley. You've decided it's both. By the time supper is done and the plates are washed again, yes. Again, it's nearly midnight. The day has eaten you alive, digested you in 18 separate courses, and spit you back out somewhere between the scullery and the staircase. You trudge to your bed, where someone's elbow is already stealing your pillow. You sleep knowing that in just a few hours, you'll wake to do it all again, like a very tired phoenix. If the phoenix also had to descale the kettle before rebirth, your alarm clock, if you can call it that, is the bell again. Except this time, it's summoning you for punishment, masquerading as Precision Laundry Day. Not yours, of course. Don't be ridiculous. You haven't had a clean undershirt in weeks. This is the family's laundry, which must be cleaned, dried, pressed, and presented as if fairies whispered it together on moonlight. You start with linens. So many linens. Sheets, tablecloths, napkins, pillowcases, undergarments, lace trims, antimacassars, dust cloths for the pianoforte, and one mysterious square that might be a cravat or a very needy handkerchief. The washing area is outside. Naturally, fresh air, they say. Better ventilation, they claim. What they mean is you can freeze your fingers off in peace. The tub is large and made of tin. The water is not warm, not soft, and certainly not sympathetic. You scrub with a block of soap that's mostly lie and regret. Then haul the soaked fabric out like you're rescuing a drowned sailor. Rinse, wring, repeat. It's a rhythmic violence. Victorian soap is an experience. It smells vaguely of ash and something floral, but not a real flower. More like the idea of a flower you saw once in a dream. The moment it hits your skin, you feel cleaner and somehow filthier, like it's scrubbing away both dirt and dignity. You boil water for the whites. Why? Because white must be blinding, not merely not grey. The copper boiler bubbles like a malicious cauldron, while you stir it with what looks suspiciously like an oar. You are now both chef and sorcerer of starch. Later comes ironing. Not with your modern plug-in steam buddy. No. You use a cast iron slab heated in a fire and wielded with 2 hands. And yes, it cools quickly. So enjoy that sprint from hearth to table and back again 24 times. Historians still argue whether Victorian ironing was more labor-intensive than mining. Some suggest miners at least got to sit occasionally. The garments are terrifying. Layers upon layers. Delicate lace. Buttons smaller than a remorseful ant. You ruin none of them. You dare not. A burn mark means not only shame, but maybe a pay deduction, a lecture or reassignment to gasp the coal bins. By midday, your arms tremble like a poorly tuned violin, but you're not done. Laundry doesn't just get washed, it must be aired. And this is England, which means you're locked in a weather roulette. Rain, fog, more rain, and a hopeful sun that lies. You drape sheets over hedges, string lines across courtyards, and place towels on bushes that do not consent. If it rains, you bring it all back. If the wind blows, you chase linens like they owe you money. There's nothing quite like sprinting after a lord's underpants while a gardener watches in silence. By evening, the drying room is full of damp steam and ancient socks. You hang the final shirts and admire your work, which no one else will. The shirts will be worn once, then returned like borrowed time. Meanwhile, your own clothes stiff with age, patched beyond logic, remain in the corner of your room. A clean day for them is a fantasy. You tell yourself maybe next Sunday, maybe next thunderstorm, maybe never. A curious fact, some Victorian households experimented with dry cleaning using petroleum-based solvents. The result, mildly cleaner clothes and the occasional house fire. You'll stick with boiling. Thanks. As you collapse into the cot with hands that smell like soap and scorched wool, the bell rings once more. It's not for laundry. It's for the drawing room fire, apparently. It's faded. And so must you back into service, into the fog, into the endless folding of someone else's comfort. The bell tolls again. Of course it does. You respond not with thought but instinct, like a Victorian Pavlovian experiment. This time it's not linens or soup or even the Lord's confused request for that one book I saw 3 summers ago. It's bedtime service. Not yours, obviously. Your bed still resembles a disgraced haystack. No, this is to ready someone else's dreams. You begin with the fireplace. You crouch low, arranging coal with practiced fingers, praying the embers behave tonight. A bad fire means cold toes for the lady upstairs and a frostier mood for you tomorrow. Once lit, you fan it carefully. The flicker of heat is mesmerizing, but you're not allowed to linger. You tuck the bedclothes, fluff the pillows with dramatic flourish, and place the warming pan between the sheets. Hot coals gliding under fabric like a dangerous secret. Then comes nightwear. Silk for some, flannel for others, lace-trimmed absurdities that seem better suited for a museum than actual wear. You lay it all out on a padded chair. There's even a glass of water beside the bed filtered, probably, unlike what you drink. You check the slippers, yes. People need assistance getting out of shoes and into softer ones. You even brush them, lest tomorrow's mud carry over into tonight's dreams. There's a logic to it. Buried somewhere under layers of duty and dust, finally, the mistress enters. You stand back, eyes low, hands clasped. You wait until she gives the briefest nod, permission to disappear. You do so with precision. You are neither seen nor unseen. You are ghost adjacent. Back in the servants' quarters, your body hums with fatigue. You'd love to collapse, but instead, you prepare for your own sleep. There's no warming pan for you, no fire, no fluff, just a blanket with the emotional warmth of wet cardboard and a mattress that groans louder than the butler. You peel off your uniform still damp from steam, still smelling of starch and panic. Your undergarments are unchanged. So is the cold. You curl into the least uncomfortable position and listen to the silence. Not real silence, just the kind where everyone's too tired to talk. Victorian servants were sometimes allowed half a day off every other Sunday. The rest of your time owned. You dream not of escape, but of slightly less work. Maybe one day, you'll just polish boots. Maybe someone else will chase laundry down the hedgerow. Historians still argue whether the rigid servant hierarchy, maids of all work at the bottom, butlers at the top, was a clever social order or just a fancy way of hiding indentured labor under cravats and powdered wigs. You, of course, have no time to debate. You're asleep before your head even touches the pillow. In your dream, you live upstairs, you ring a bell, and tea arrives. The fire is always warm, the linen's always fresh, and your slippers are always waiting. Then you wake to the real bell. It's 4:30 a.m. Time to clean the ash, fetch the bread, boil the tea water. Time to disappear again into another day beneath someone else's comfort. Now, we settle in for the kind of sleep-deprived, frostbitten, rice-deficient journey you didn't ask for but are already committed to. The sun hasn't even peeked over the pine-draped ridgelines. And yet you're awake. Of course, it's hard to sleep when your pillow is a rolled-up straw mat and your blanket is whatever your older brother didn't steal in the night. Breath fog clings to the rice paper walls of your thatched shack, which isn't great insulation but does make every whisper feel like an open broadcast to the whole village. You would never think that simply not dying of exposure would count as an achievement. But here you are alive, somehow, and cold enough to envy icicles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your name is irrelevant, because social class comes first. You are a Hayakusho, a humble peasant farmer living in a mountain village during the Edo period of feudal Japan. The good news, you haven't been conscripted to build a castle wall or serve in a daimyo's death march. The bad news, you've got about 46 tasks to complete before sundown, your roof is leaking, and your socks don't exist. The morning air is so cold it physically hurts. You sit up on your thin, moldy mat and immediately regret being upright. You feel 80 years old, you're actually 19. Your knees pop, your spine creaks, and your first breath of the day tastes like smoked ash and regret. The fire pit in the center of the one-room hut is no longer lit, having coughed its last ember sometime before dawn. If you want warmth, you'll have to make it from scratch, which means coaxing a fire out of damp wood and wishful thinking. You fumble around in the dark, quietly, because your younger siblings are still asleep, and waking them too early could trigger a miniature civil war. Outside, the chickens are already scratching and clucking like unpaid interns. The neighbor's dog begins barking at absolutely nothing, which in this mountain village probably means a deer, a spirit, or an unlucky breeze. You step outside to relieve yourself. No toilets, obviously. You head toward the designated pea corner behind your hut, carefully avoiding the frozen patch that took out your uncle last winter. RIP Uncle Toji. Gravity and icy stones don't mix. You return to the house, feet frozen, hoping your toes are still attached. You glance at the shrine shelf near the door. An offering of yesterday's rice crust sits there, uneaten by gods and mice alike. The local kami are either not hungry or just as unimpressed with millet as you are. Historians still argue whether these spiritual rituals actually brought comfort or just kept people too busy to notice their hunger. Back inside, you toss another log onto the fire pit and finally coax a flicker of warmth. Your siblings stir. Someone coughs. Someone else grumbles about a dream involving warm baths and unlimited rice. You all laugh, then cry, then pretend to be cheerful. It's important to maintain morale, even if that morale is held together with twine and sarcasm. Outside, mist curls low between the houses. The mountains tower like judgmental uncles. You've got a full day ahead: harvest chores, wood chopping, and probably a passive-aggressive encounter with the neighbor who insists your goat is too loud. You roll your shoulders, creak to your feet, and step into your sandals, which are less shoes and more woven suggestions. They were once waterproof. So was your optimism. You inhale sharply and walk out into another day of survival by routine. It's not glamorous, but it's yours. And hey, at least you woke up. You've made it to breakfast. Congratulations. That may sound like a small feat, but considering you nearly slipped on a frozen chicken and your sandal straps are one thread from oblivion, it's basically a miracle. Morning meals in your feudal Japanese mountain village are a kind of slow, bleak ceremony. The rice is always yesterday's, reheated if you're lucky, more like lightly steamed gravel if you're not. You don't so much chew it as negotiate with it. A small portion of miso soup simmers over the fire. It smells faintly of warmth, salt, and desperation. There might even be one floating strip of daikon in their vegetable jackpot. You stare into the broth like it holds secrets. And maybe it does. Like how the local tax collector somehow has fresh tofu every week while you haven't seen tofu since the year of the locusts. Historians still argue whether the village elites hoarded resources or if the tofu fairy was just choosy. You eat in near silence. Not because it's a quiet, meditative moment, but because everyone is conserving energy. Talking burns calories. Calories are expensive. Also, it's hard to make conversation with rice mush stuck in your throat. Once your wooden bowl is scraped clean, you rinse it with a ladle of cold stream water clean enough. Maybe, assuming the upstream neighbors haven't been rinsing anything too suspicious, you dry it on your sleeve, which is made of the same rough hemp as every other textile in your life. It's not soft, it's not warm, but it doesn't give you splinters, which already makes it your favorite item of clothing. You step outside, teeth chattering, and begin your assigned chores. Today, you're gathering firewood, but not just any wood. It needs to be dry, dense, and pleasing to the gods of combustion, none of which, it turns out, grow conveniently close to the village. You hike into the trees with a dull hatchet and a prayer to not die of boredom or bad footing. The forest is stunning. Sure, towering cedars, low mist, birdsong, but you don't have time to admire it. You're focused on not stepping in bear scat or slicing your toe on a hidden rock. There are no boots, just those barely there sandals and the hope that frostbite isn't contagious. You swing the hatchet, it sticks. You yank, it doesn't budge. You swear under your breath and then louder until the wind carries your profanity up the slope and possibly all the way to the shrine. Still, you manage a decent pile. Your reward, a strained back and a renewed understanding that the term chopping wood is romanticized nonsense. It's not rhythmic. It's not cathartic. It's just you versus a stubborn tree limb in a passive-aggressive war of attrition. You load the firewood into a rope sling, trudge downhill, and pass the neighbor's goat again. The goat gives you a look that says, "I know I'm loud, I just don't care." You nod. Fair enough. Back at the hut, your younger brother has spilled the miso pot. Again, your mother doesn't yell. She sighs with the weight of someone who's used up all her yelling energy before sunrise. You mop it up with the same rag you use for everything else spills. Sweat, the occasional nosebleed. It's the Swiss Army knife of feudal fabric. And just when you think you'll get 5 minutes of rest, someone yells about a roof leak. Rain is coming. You grab the patch kit, which is just straw, mud, and blind optimism. You climb the rickety ladder and remind yourself not to lean too far. The last time someone fell off, the village shaman said it was due to poor balance with the sky spirits. You're not taking any chances. Rain starts to fall as you jam straw into gaps and smear mud between rafters. It works, sort of, like patching a sinking ship with wishes. You finish just in time to be soaked to the skin, but proud enough to pretend that's a win. The day is far from over, and your hands are cracked like dry rice paddies. But for now, you've survived breakfast and avoided serious injury. In this village, that's basically a promotion. The rain has passed, but you haven't dried. You're damp in that special way only straw roof leaks can achieve an all-over cold that soaks not just your clothes, but your spirit. Which brings us to one of the greatest daily adventures, the bathroom. Except there is no room. Not in the architectural sense. Not even in the moral sense. What you have is a wooden pit, 2 planks, and the ever-widening knowledge that comfort is a modern myth. You trudge toward the edge of the village, clutching a bamboo ladle, and what dignity you have left. The latrine is perched perilously on a slope, as though gravity itself is an accessory to your humiliation. A thatched screen offers a gesture at privacy. But it's the sort of curtain a polite breeze could flip up with the slightest mischief. Congratulations. Now you've performed for the chickens again. You would never think that doing your business could feel like a tactical operation. But here you are, bracing against a wind that threatens to tip the entire platform and you with it. Below you, a compost pit, rich with smells that defy metaphor. Let's just say if you bottled it, you'd be arrested. There's no toilet paper, no leaves, just a wash ladle and water that could legally qualify as glacier runoff. You squint, dip it with shaking hands, and prepare for the most chilling moment of your day. It's less a rinse and more a cry for help that no one answers. The good news, you don't die. The bad news, your hands are now numb and somehow still not clean. Historians still argue whether feudal villages adapted to these harsh sanitary practices out of necessity, religion, or simply collective trauma. What they agree on the spread of intestinal parasites was essentially a group project. Congratulations again, you're part of something larger than yourself. It just happens to be a tapeworm. You rinse your hands at the stream downstream, naturally, from where other people rinse everything else. It's all very circular. The water's shockingly cold, so you pretend that makes it purifying. A lie passed down for generations. You dry your hands on your pants, which you now realize were also wet before you started. Moisture is your permanent accessory. Nothing ever truly dries in a mountain village, just rotates from wet to less wet. Mold isn't a guest, it's a resident with its own room. You glance toward the manor on the hill, the big estate with clean tiles, actual indoor toilets, and the kind of bathwater that's heated on purpose. You'll probably never see inside, but every now and then, a whisper reaches the village. Like how the nobles use paper for cleaning themselves. Actual paper. You can't decide if that's indulgent or horrifying. The idea of throwing something that precious into a pit seems criminal. Then again, so does your current hygiene routine. Back home, your little sister runs past you barefoot, shrieking with joy. She's playing in the mud, which, today, is more like an organic stew made from goat droppings and rainwater. You open your mouth to yell, but stop. There's no point. Kids in the village are made of some kind of mud-resistant magic. Your grandmother waves you over with a bucket. It's time to refill the water jugs. Again, you sigh, stretch your sore arms, and trudge back toward the stream for the 4th time today. Your reward, 1 splash on your tunic and 3 new blisters. As you lift the bucket, you can't help but reflect there's a strange kind of peace here. A rhythm, like misery set to a drumbeat. Every inconvenience is familiar, expected, and somehow bearable. And tomorrow, you'll repeat it all. Because in this world, toilet trauma isn't a one-time story. It's a lifestyle. You're starving, but that's not news. You're always starving. Hunger is the background music of your life, soft, persistent, and as inescapable as your own shadow. Which means it's time to eat. A word that in this mountain village means something quite different than you'd hope. Breakfast, or what pretends to be breakfast, is rice gruel. Thin, watery, and boasting all the flavor complexity of wet cardboard, it sloshes in a lacquer bowl, slightly warm, slightly lumpy, and somehow also slightly cold at the same time. A single pickled plum floats in it like it's royalty, which it sort of is. Considering that it's the only thing in there with any character, you slurp politely, not because you love it, but because you need to show gratitude for the half-rotted rice someone managed to salvage from the bottom of last season's supply jars. It's food, and it hasn't actively attacked you, so you count that as a win. Now, you would never think that a turnip could be a source of dread, but here, it's your nemesis. Steamed, mashed, grated, dried, fermented. There are more forms of turnip here than there are words for love in Japanese poetry. And each version tastes like a creative insult. Still, your grandmother sets the table with care. 3 generations share one tray gruel. Daikon and miso soup, so weak it might be water politely flavored with bean thoughts. You chew through a slab of something mysterious, likely tofu. Possibly yesterday's tofu that was reinterpreted as today's protein. A culinary encore. If you will, historians still argue whether these meals were acts of cultural endurance or culinary desperation. Either way, it takes real skill to survive off a diet that could be out-chewed by paper. Lunch isn't a break, it's a placeholder. Fieldwork doesn't stop, so you scarf something on the go. Cold barley cakes wrapped in bamboo leaves, already hardened into little edible bricks. You chew, and wonder how your teeth haven't filed themselves into dust. Occasionally, a miracle occurs, a dried fish. You chew it for what feels like an hour. It's salty, it's stiff, it stares at you like it remembers being alive. That's protein, though. One glorious leathery fish to fuel your labor. And if you're lucky and you're not, you might get a chestnut or a wild persimmon. Sweetness is almost offensive in this world. A reminder of what you don't usually get. So, when one does appear, you nibble it slowly, like it might disappear if you blink. You don't cook the meals, the older women do. Which means your mother spends most of her time stoking the fire, drying mushrooms, or apologizing to the gods for the flavor of her own food. You try not to notice the soot in the broth. It's not flavor, it's seasoning with a story. Dinner brings more gruel, but thicker this time. Celebration. It coats your tongue like sadness in paste form. You chase it with hot tea made from roasted barley husks, which tastes exactly like it sounds, smoky regret. There's also one pickled thing on the side, a cucumber. A radish nobody's sure, but it's sour, salty, and probably older than your younger brother. Quirky fact in the rare event of a feast. People might roast a wild boar or brace yourself a bear. Yes, a bear, but that only happens if a bear stumbles into the wrong trap and forgets it's the apex predator. Mostly, you just eat moss-adjacent things that grow on damp logs and try not to ask questions. And yet, even as you gag quietly on a turnip porridge fusion dish, you know this food keeps you alive. Barely, but survival isn't gourmet, it's just gruel. Day after day, washed down with hope and a little barley tea. And tonight, as your stomach rumbles its gentle protest, you lie back and whisper your favorite bedtime prayer. Please let tomorrow's rice not be moldy. You wake up before the sun again, not because you're enthusiastic about the day, but because your blanket made from worn hemp has slid off your feet, and the draft from the paper wall has invited itself under your ribs like a passive-aggressive ghost. Your clothes, you slept in them, because they are your clothes, as in, the only set you own, and removing them at night would be considered an act of dangerous optimism. You stretch, slowly, because sudden movement risks snapping your body in half. Your robe is stiff from yesterday's sweat and the day before's mud. And bonus, possibly a little smoke from last week's fire pit. The cloth scratches like it's been soaked in pine needles. Hemp and coarse cotton make up most rural clothing. Woven by hand and dyed with whatever brown or grey happened to be cheapest that year. You don't choose colour. Colour chooses rich people. You pull on your split-toe socks, which have the personality of damp canvas, and slip your feet into straw sandals. These break easily, which is fine because your feet are already broken in. And by broken in, we mean calloused beyond human recognition. Your clothing doesn't change with the season. Instead, the weather changes how much you suffer. Summer, your robe sticks to you like a clammy curse. Winter, it stiffens into a sort of wearable plank. There is no layering. There is no fleece. There is only hope. You own a hat. If you're lucky, a conical straw cassock to keep off rain or sun. But the wind laughs at it, and the rain dances straight down your neck. There is no waterproofing, unless you count personal denial. Quirky fact villagers sometimes used ashes rubbed into their clothes to repel insects. This means you routinely smell like a dying fire. But on the plus side, the bugs hate it as much as you do. Lice and fleas, however, remain loyal companions, your personal entourage. Historians still argue whether homespun powders or herbal rubs did anything besides create scented distractions. You glance at your neighbors. They wear the same clothes they wore yesterday and the day before. Some garments are patched so thoroughly that it's unclear whether any of the original fabric remains. It's like playing thread-based Ship of Theseus, but with sleeves. Bathing doesn't happen often, so clothes become both outfit and odor archive. It's not even shameful, just part of life. Washing them requires a river, soap route, and at least a semi-conscious decision to spend 3 hours freezing your knuckles off. You choose not to. And yet, these garments are heirlooms. Your robe might once have belonged to your older cousin, shortened and stitched by your mother to fit your frame. That patch on the sleeve, your aunt's work, the stain on the hem, rice gruel. Circa last spring. It's not clothing, it's family history. Held together with needlework and stubbornness. You notice a tear under your arm. You make a note to fix it tonight. After pounding rice and hauling firewood and not collapsing, your needle is bone, and your thread is either hemp or spider silk, if you're lucky and brave enough to harvest it. The one thing you don't wear, shoes. Not real ones. Those are for nobles, monks, or people who live where roads exist. Your straw sandals disintegrate by the week, replaced by whatever your uncle managed to weave from leftover rice stalks. Your feet, meanwhile, develop armor. You can walk on pebbles without flinching. You can step in manure and not notice. Congratulations. You've achieved barefoot enlightenment. There's no wardrobe, no closet. Your clothes hang by the fire, catching soot. If you need to impress someone, say, a visiting tax officer, you flip your robe inside out and hope the cleaner side isn't also the more torn one. And so off you go, wrapped in woven discomfort, ready to face the mountain winds with the stoic pride of someone who hasn't felt true warmth since the last village festival bonfire. Fashion, no, but functional mostly. And somehow, you always manage to tie the sash just tight enough that nothing falls off. That, in itself, is victory. You don't need a dentist, mostly because you don't have one. Also because, frankly, your teeth are already planning their early retirement. It begins with the morning ritual biting into yesterday's rice ball. The crunch you hear might be a tiny pebble, or it might be a molar. It's hard to say. There is no toothbrush. You chew twigs, if you remember. Maybe rub a little charcoal across your teeth, not because it whitens, but because the elders say it clears heat. No one explains what heat has to do with molars falling out mid-sentence, but you nod respectfully anyway. Your mouth tastes like smoke and fermented fish. Oral hygiene is less of a routine and more of an abstract hope. You feel a sharp hand near your back teeth. Again, you poke your tongue around and find the soft mush of an abscess, pulsing like a warning drum. But you do nothing, because doing something might involve your neighbor's grandmother, who has a bamboo stick, no license, and excellent aim. She calls it tooth persuasion. You call it a medieval horror movie. Mainstream historians agree that dental care was non-existent for the average villager. Teeth were viewed as disposable, like sandals or dignity. Losing them was expected, keeping them a miracle. And the standard solution to a rotting tooth: tie a string to it, tie the other end to a door, close the door. Pray the pain leaves with the tooth. Spoiler, it doesn't. Your breath could melt lacquer. But everyone's breath smells like pickled garlic and regret, so nobody comments. There's camaraderie in decay, a smile. In this village is a window into collective suffering. Sometimes you try chewing herbs clove, if you're lucky, or Sancho pepper if you're desperate. They don't heal, but they sting enough to distract you. Pain-cancelling pain, a brilliant innovation. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some folk healers believed cavities were caused by tiny worms living inside your teeth. They'd try to smoke them out by applying hot oil or incense to your gums. You've seen this done. Once, the man hasn't smiled since. And yet, you need your teeth to eat. So you avoid anything too hard. Problem is, everything is too hard. Rice gets stale, dried fish weaponized, chestnuts unforgiving. Even tofu has a bounce to it that mocks your limited jaw power. Historians still argue whether upper-class samurai had better access to tooth care. Some were buried with gold-capped molars, but for your class, the only golden thing is jaundice. You glance at the shrine and wonder, do the gods accept offerings of dental pain? Maybe you'll light incense later, or just cry a little behind the storage shed. There's a boy in the next hut who's already lost all his front teeth. He's 12. You nod at him in solidarity, both of you sipping thin soup like octogenarians. At least your gums are strong. Someone says, whatever that means. On festival days, when sweet mochi makes its grand appearance, you don't smile with joy, you flinch. Sugar means sticking, and sticking means pulling. You eat slowly, carefully. You savor each chew, because the next one might be your last. Night comes, and with it, the throb behind your eye socket. You try sleeping with your head tilted, hoping gravity will do dentistry's job. You dream of cold rivers, numbing pain. You wake up, still aching, still smiling through a mouth that's quietly falling apart. And yet, somehow you adapt. You learn to chew on the other side, to sip more, to talk less. You become a quiet master of discomfort, a grand strategist of the jaw. You, the molarless warrior, continue. You wake up before the sun. Again. Because in this mountain village, the rooster doesn't wake you. You wake the rooster. He's honestly getting a bit resentful about it. You stretch your aching limbs, slip into your stiff clothes, and step outside into the wet mist. Today is not special, which means it will be long, backbreaking, and slightly soul-eroding. There is no such thing as a day off. The land doesn't take breaks, and neither do you. The mountain doesn't care if your knee clicks, or your back screams, or your lungs ache. You have to haul water, till fields, chop wood, weed terraces, and carry bundles of rice stalks so large they briefly give you the illusion of becoming a rice golem. And the tools, oh yes, they're delightful. Your hoe is a splintered stick tied to a flat iron wedge. Your rake lost half its teeth last season. You sharpen your sickle on rocks and whispered apologies. Ergonomics, in this context, is a myth like perfect harvests or not stepping in manure. You begin your work by clearing weeds in a rice paddy. The water is cold. The mud sucks at your toes with such persistence it could qualify as romantic. You bend over for hours, gently pulling invasive stalks and muttering curses that the frogs pretend not to hear. The leeches hear you, though, and they love you. Deeply, passionately. Sometimes your job is more woodcutter than farmer. The forest is uphill. Of course, everything is uphill in Japan. You climb for hours, swing a dull axe at trees that clearly resent being disturbed, and then carry the logs back down. Firewood is essential without it. No food, no heat, no boiled water, so you shoulder a burden heavier than your last 3 regrets and trudge on. Historians widely agree that village labor was ceaseless, seasonal. Yes, but seasonal just meant switching which body part hurt the most. And while men often bore the brute lifting, women weren't lounging with fans and poetry scrolls. They harvested, cooked, fetched, spun, and raised children often simultaneously. You watch your neighbor, a woman named Uma, kneeling in the dirt, planting seedlings while breastfeeding her baby with the casual efficiency of a war general. She wipes her forehead with one hand and shoos a chicken with the other. You silently applaud. Children aren't exempt. By age 5, they're already hauling water or guarding vegetables from crows. You remember being 5. You fell into a stream, lost a sandal, and learned 3 new swear words from your grandmother. Happy times. There are other jobs in the village. Of course. The thatcher spends his days balancing on steep rooftops. Wrestling straw and gravity, the potter works by firelight. With hands so dry they resemble cracked pottery themselves. Even the priest sweats he has to haul firewood too, and keep the shrine clean, and explain every unlucky omen to a deeply anxious community. Fringe tidbit. Some villages employed scare actors, people who dressed as ghosts, to frighten animals away from crops. Imagine painting your face white, hiding behind a bush, and yelling boo at boars. Not glamorous, but oddly satisfying. Back to your day, you now get to carry a full basket of daikon down a winding trail to the main road. Each step is betrayal. Your knees beg for amnesty, you slip once, briefly consider never getting back up, and then rise anyway, because the mountain won't harvest itself. Historians still argue whether rural villagers found moments of joy in their labor. Songs, festivals, communal meals all existed. But between sunrise and sunset, your main relationship is with sweat. And your side hustle is with pain. You pass your cousin on the way back. He nods, chewing something unidentifiable. You try to smile, but your shoulders are too tired. Words are inefficient. You both understand work doesn't end. It just moves. The seasons shift like moods here, each one offering a fresh, personal vendetta, you would think. Tucked away in a tranquil Japanese mountain village, that nature might show a hint of kindness. Instead, the weather has mastered the ancient art of psychological warfare. Let's start with winter. The snow doesn't fall, it ambushes. The wind has claws. And your house, built with love, bamboo, and approximately 0 insulation, responds to it like a sieve. You huddle under your straw futon, which generously offers all the warmth of a particularly tired haystack. Your breath turns visible before you even step outside. And inside, the air isn't much better. You light a fire, yes, but that's assuming you remember to dry enough wood during summer, and that no one else already stole it. Because in winter, theft isn't personal, it's thermodynamic. If you're lucky, you have a hibachi, a small charcoal brazier that gently heats your freezing toes while also threatening carbon monoxide poisoning. Historians confirmed that winters in mountain villages could be brutally isolating, and villagers relied on careful storage of food and fuel to survive the harshest weeks. But historians also agree that nobody really thrived. You don't thrive with chilblains and a nose that's frozen shut. You stuff paper into your sleeves and behind your neck. It's not for reading, it's insulation, a trick handed down from someone long dead and presumably still cold. And then, without warning, comes summer. Glorious, hellish summer, the kind that makes you nostalgic for your frozen toes. The humidity is thick enough to drink, but unrefreshing. It's hot, sticky, and full of buzzing. The mosquitoes are a unified army with a clear mission: find you, eat you, multiply. You sweat in places you didn't know could sweat. Your clothes, already limited in number and breathability, turn into damp rags fused to your skin. And no, you can't change outfits. Laundry day is a luxury and a full-body commitment. Your home, once a block of ice, is now an oven. No fan, no cold drinks, and certainly no air conditioning. You lie awake at night on a bamboo mat that absorbs your misery and radiates it back at you. Windows are open, but that just lets the insects in. You finally fall asleep, lulled by the crooning of crickets and the gentle nibbling of lice. Historians still argue whether heat-related exhaustion or cold-related illness claimed more lives in isolated villages. You remember reading somewhere, in a dream maybe. But right now, you feel like both are taking turns. Autumn offers brief relief, just enough to tease. The trees turn gold, and you almost believe in magic. Then you remember autumn is harvest season. So your reward for surviving summer is backbreaking work, dawn till dusk, lifting rice bundles that whisper, "We grew heavy just for you." Spring ha. Spring is mud season. Everything is damp. Everything smells like damp. Mold blossoms on every surface, including your soul. You can't dry your futon, your shoes, or your will to keep going, but cherry blossoms. Oh yes, they bloom, and you smile, because you're culturally obligated to. Quirky tidbit villagers use dried persimmons as weather indicators. Hang one by a window if it shrivels oddly. Prepare for frost. If it molds, prepare for sorrow. Not very scientific, but when your other meteorological tools are looking at the sky and screaming, you take what you can get. Every season demands something. Your body adapts by surrendering. You stop expecting comfort and start measuring life in units of tolerability. The cold doesn't kill you. The heat doesn't either. But they both nibble. And yet, you trudge forward, season after season, like the mountain, like everyone else. Water essential, sacred, and occasionally your sworn enemy. You'd think something so basic would be easier to handle. But in your feudal mountain village, water is not delivered, purified, or temperature controlled. It's hauled, bucket by backbreaking bucket, from a river, spring, or, if the gods are smiling, which they aren't, a well. Every drop is earned. You wake up thirsty, not just I need a drink thirsty, but my tongue is a sun-dried fish thirsty. Unfortunately, there's no faucet to rescue you. Instead, you stumble, half awake, to the communal water basin outside, where the ladle is shared by the entire village and washed approximately never. The water is earthy, technically clear, but with undertones of moss, sediment, and last week's rain runoff. Still, you drink, because not drinking isn't an option. Historians agree that many villages relied heavily on natural sources and devised ingenious channeling systems, bamboo pipes, stone basins, or even diverted creeks. But ingenious doesn't mean clean. It just means we figured out how to survive. Mostly, sometimes you boil the water. Sometimes, firewood is precious, and boiling water for every sip is a dream reserved for the terminally paranoid or the terminally rich. The rest of the time, you roll the dice. Today, it's a few gut cramps. Tomorrow may be worms, or dysentery, or a mysterious illness people call the red belly, which sounds cute until it isn't. Then there's bathing, a noble idea in theory, a logistical nightmare in practice. First, you must heat water using half your weekly fuel rations. Then, you lug the steaming bucket to the corner of your drafty home, or more likely, to the shared bathhouse, if you're lucky enough to have one. If not, congratulations, you're washing in the river, with leeches, in winter. And here's the kicker: bathing too often is considered risky. That's right. Folks in your village believe frequent washing opens the pores and invites disease in like a guest to a dinner party. Better to stay dusty and alive, Grandma says. So, you compromise, scrub the face, maybe the hands. Once a week, if you're fancy. For soap, you've got ash, rice bran, or a mixture that smells like regret. Shampoo, a root, crushed into paste. Conditioner, wind and sorrow. A fringe tidbit: some villagers actually used fermented rice water as a skin treatment, which sounds fancy, but mostly leaves you smelling like leftover sake. Still, skin's softer, right if you don't mind the flies. Then there's laundry. Imagine trying to clean your only set of clothes in freezing river water while your fingers go numb and small fish investigate your shins. There are no washboards, just stones and hope. And drying good luck in rainy seasons. You hang things over the fire and pray they don't catch flames or reek of smoke forever. And yet somehow you survive. Your gut adjusts, your skin toughens, your nose adapts to the ever-present scent of mildew, fish, and effort. And you learn that water is not your friend or enemy. It's a silent partner in your daily dance of discomfort. Sometimes helpful, sometimes hazardous, always essential. Historians still argue whether these villagers' resilience stemmed more from cultural practice or sheer lack of alternatives. Either way, you do what you must. Drink, wash, haul, repeat. And tonight, as you settle on your bamboo mat, lips chapped, hair wild, a wooden cup of faintly murky water by your side, you think maybe, just maybe, that next sip won't make your stomach growl in protest. You drink anyway. And with that, your day ends, soaked in tradition and possibly bacteria.